The day after we moved in, I got a call from the previous owner. I saw what your son did while you were at work, on camera, come over, alone. What could my son have done in a single afternoon that made a stranger so afraid? What I discovered next would shatter everything I thought I knew about my own family. My name is Ethan Hale, and at 58, I thought I had life figured out. As a payroll supervisor, I'd spent decades being methodical, careful, and quietly competent. People underestimated me, saw me as just another middle-aged office worker going through the motions. That perception would turn out to be my greatest advantage. The apartment was supposed to be a fresh start. After my divorce, I needed somewhere new, somewhere that didn't echo with memories of a failed marriage. My 27-year-old son, Calder, had been enthusiastic about helping me move, which should have been my first warning sign. Calder was charming in that dangerous way that gets people what they want, tall, confident, with a smile that could convince you to hand over your wallet while thanking him for the privilege. His girlfriend Mireya was cut from the same cloth, but sharper. At 26, she had that social media savvy that turned every moment into content, every relationship into opportunity. Where Calder was charmingly manipulative, Mireya was calculating. Together, they were a force that I was only beginning to understand. Moving day had gone smoothly, too smoothly, in retrospect. Calder and Mireya had insisted on helping, arriving early with coffee and enthusiasm that felt almost performative. They'd taken charge of arranging furniture, with Mireya snapping photos for memories and making suggestions about the layout that I'd politely declined. "Dad, you should put your desk by the window," Calder had said, handling my laptop bag with what I now realize was more interest than helpfulness. Better light for working from home. I'd thanked him, but kept my workspace exactly where I wanted it, facing away from windows, private and secure. Old habits from years of handling sensitive payroll information. When I returned from my first day of work in the new place, something felt off. The apartment smelled different, not bad, just lived in a way that one day of occupancy shouldn't have created. The kitchen had a lingering scent of cooking, though I'd only had coffee that morning. Small things were slightly out of place, a couch cushion fluffed differently, my mail stack shifted, the bathroom towel hanging in a way I never folded it. I attributed it to the stress of moving and went about my evening routine. That's when I noticed the smoke detector in the living room. There was a tiny red light blinking on it that I didn't remember seeing before. Most smoke detectors have indicator lights, so I dismissed it as normal. The voicemail came that evening while I was making dinner. "Mr. Hale, this is Gordon Shevlin, the previous owner of your apartment. I need to speak with you urgently. I forgot to remove a security camera before I moved out, and I saw something today that concerns me. Please call me back. It's important that you come over alone. I'm in Unit 4B now. Don't mention this to anyone else yet." His voice was shaky, nervous in a way that made my stomach clench. Gordon was a retired engineer, methodical and precise in the few interactions we'd had during the sale. For him to sound rattled meant something was seriously wrong. I called him back immediately. "Mr. Shevlin, you said something about a camera?" Yes. Listen, I installed a security system when I lived there, had some break-ins in the building a few years back. I thought I'd removed everything, but there's still one camera active. It's disguised as a smoke detector in the living room. The red blinking light. A sudden chill swept through me. "What did you see?" "Your son, he was going through your belongings, your bags, your desk. But Mr. Hale, that's not the worst of it. You need to come over tomorrow morning, early, before you go to work. And please, don't let anyone know we're meeting." I barely slept that night. Every sound in the apartment seemed amplified, every shadow suspicious. What could Calder have been looking for? What was Gordon afraid to tell me over the phone? The next morning, I knocked on Gordon's door at 7 a.m. sharp. He answered immediately, as if he'd been waiting by the door. "Come in, quickly," he said, ushering me into his smaller apartment. It was neat and organized with computer equipment set up on a desk by the window. I need to show you something, but first, has anything gone missing from your place? I'm not sure. Some things seemed moved around, but I thought it was just from the move. Gordon nodded grimly and turned to his computer. I've been wrestling with whether to show you this. It feels like violating your privacy, but what I saw... He pulled up a video file. This is from yesterday, about an hour after you left for work. The footage was grainy but clear enough. There was Calder, alone in my living room, going through my laptop bag with systematic precision. He pulled out files, photographed documents with his phone, and spent several minutes at my desk, opening drawers and examining papers. That's not the worst part, Gordon said quietly. Keep watching. Mireya entered the frame, carrying what looked like cleaning supplies. She and Calder had a brief conversation, no audio on the camera, and then she handed him something small, a key card. They both looked at the camera and laughed as if sharing a private joke. They know about the camera? I asked. I don't think so. I think they were just being casual about whatever they're doing. Gordon paused the video. Mr. Hale, I've been watching the building since I moved out. Old habits. Your son and his girlfriend have had people coming and going from that apartment every day since you moved in. Different people carrying luggage. My hands were shaking. What are you saying? I think they're running some kind of operation out of your place while you're at work. And based on what I saw him photographing, I think they're after more than just your apartment. Gordon ejected a small flash drive from his computer and handed it to me. This is a copy of everything, all the footage from the past 2 days. You need to be very careful about how you handle this. I stared at the drive in my palm. Such a small thing to hold such devastating information. Why are you helping me? Gordon's expression softened. I have a son too. Not like yours, thankfully, but family can be complicated. You seem like a decent man, Mr. Hale. You don't deserve to be taken advantage of. I left Gordon's apartment with more questions than answers, but with one thing clear. My son was not the person I thought he was. And whatever he and Mireya were planning, it was bigger than just snooping through my belongings. Back in my apartment, I noticed things I'd missed before. A calendar on the kitchen counter, not mine, with today's date circled in red, marked inspection. A sticky note on my refrigerator with a 6-digit code labeled garage. I didn't have a garage. When I checked my desk drawer, my heart sank. The folder containing my banking information, social security documents, and work credentials was gone. The next few days revealed a pattern that sent a sharp chill through me. Every morning, I'd go to work as usual, maintaining my routine while quietly documenting everything I observed. Every evening, I'd return to find subtle signs that my apartment had been occupied during my absence. The first concrete proof came when I tried to buy groceries. My card was declined. At the ATM, I discovered that my checking account balance was nearly zero, despite having just received my paycheck. Someone had set up an automatic transfer to an external account, an account I'd never opened. At work, I kept my suspicions to myself, but I couldn't hide my distraction. During my lunch break, Tessa Klein from HR approached me in the break room. "Ethan, I need to talk to you about something unusual," she said, her voice low. "Someone tried to access your payroll profile yesterday. The attempt was flagged by our security system." My coffee cup rattled against the table as I set it down. "What kind of access?" "Someone tried to change your direct deposit information. The request came from your employee portal, but the IP address was traced to a location that wasn't your home or office." Tessa pulled out a printed report. "The attempted change would have redirected your entire paycheck to a different bank account." I stared at the report, recognizing the bank name, the same one where the mysterious external transfer had been set up. "Tessa, I need you to flag my account for any further changes. No modifications without in-person verification and a secondary approval." "Already done," she said. But Ethan, this looks like identity theft. You should consider filing a police report. That afternoon, I called my older brother Ronan. At 63, Ronan was everything I wasn't. Direct, confrontational, and completely unimpressed by charm or manipulation. If anyone could give me straight advice, it was him. "You're being played, little brother," Ronan said, after I'd explained the situation. "Your boy is treating you like an ATM, and you're letting him." "I'm not letting him do anything. I'm gathering evidence." "Evidence for what? A strongly worded conversation? Ethan, this is theft. This is fraud. You need to stop thinking like a father and start thinking like a victim." Ronan's words stung because they were true. I'd been so focused on understanding why Calder was doing this that I'd barely begun to address what he was actually doing. That evening, I decided to do some detective work of my own. While taking out the trash, I noticed our neighbor Nina Patterson watering plants on her balcony. Nina was a school secretary, observant by nature and friendly in a way that invited conversation. "How are you settling in?" she asked. "Well, thank you, though it's been busier than I expected." Nina's expression shifted slightly. "Oh, you mean with all the visitors? I was wondering about that. You've had quite a few people coming and going during the day. Different folks with luggage, usually staying just a night or two." My stomach dropped. "During the day?" "Oh yes, while you're at work. Your son seems to be running some kind of hospitality service. Very enterprising young man." She paused, studying my expression. You did know about that, didn't you?" I managed a weak smile. "Of course. Just trying to keep track of the schedule." Back in my apartment, I searched more carefully. In the kitchen trash, I found a crumpled checklist titled Airbnb Cleaning Protocol. In the bathroom, there were small bottles of shampoo and conditioner, the kind hotels provide for guests. Under the doormat, I discovered a scratched keycard that didn't belong to me. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed was devastating. Calder and Mireya weren't just stealing from me. They were running an illegal subletting operation out of my apartment, using my home as a source of income while systematically draining my bank accounts. I spent that night creating a detailed log of everything I'd discovered, photographing evidence and organizing it chronologically. If Ronan was right about needing to think like a victim rather than a father, then I needed to build a case that would stand up to scrutiny. The next morning brought another shock. I received an automated text from my bank about a large withdrawal attempt that had been flagged for review. When I called Marcel Dupont, the fraud specialist assigned to my account, he painted an even grimmer picture. "Mr. Hale, we've identified at least 6 unauthorized transactions over the past week. The pattern suggests someone with intimate knowledge of your banking habits and access to your personal information. This isn't a random scam. This is someone who knows you well." "How much are we talking about?" "So far, approximately $4,000. But the attempted withdrawal last night was for $12,000, your entire savings account. Our system flagged it because it was initiated from an unrecognized device." I felt sick. $4,000 was bad enough, but $12,000 would have wiped me out completely. The only reason it hadn't gone through was a computer algorithm, not any wisdom on my part. "What can we do to stop this?" "We're freezing all external transfers and requiring in-person verification for any account changes. I'm also opening a formal fraud investigation. You'll need to file a police report, and I'd recommend consulting with an attorney about your options." That afternoon, I found myself sitting in the office of Grant Ossie, a legal aid attorney who specialized in tenant rights and family law. Grant was patient and methodical, listening to my story without judgment before explaining my options. "The challenge here is that your son is family, and he's been living with you with your permission. That complicates the legal landscape," Grant explained. "However, the financial fraud is clear-cut criminal behavior. The subletting operation is also illegal. You're violating your lease terms, which could result in your eviction." But I didn't know about the subletting. That's exactly why you need to act quickly and decisively. We need to document everything, establish a clear timeline, and get your son and his girlfriend out of your apartment before this gets worse. Grant helped me draft a formal eviction notice, explaining the legal requirements and timelines. Under state law, I could require Calder to leave with 30 days' notice, but the illegal activity might allow for a faster process. The key is documentation, Grant emphasized. Every conversation, every piece of evidence, every witness statement. If this goes to court, you want an overwhelming case. I left Grant's office with a clear action plan and a growing sense of resolve. For too long, I'd been reacting to Calder's actions instead of controlling the situation. That was about to change. The next phase of my investigation required a delicate balance. I needed to gather evidence without alerting Calder and Mireya to what I knew, while also beginning the legal process of removing them from my apartment and my life. Marcel at the bank had been incredibly helpful, providing me with detailed transaction records that painted a clear picture of the theft. The unauthorized transfers had started small, $50 here, $100 there, amounts that might go unnoticed on a busy person's bank statement. But they'd escalated quickly, with the most recent attempts targeting my entire savings. The pattern suggests they were testing your monitoring habits, Marcel explained during our meeting. Small amounts to see if you'd notice, then increasingly larger ones as they gained confidence. He showed me ATM footage from the bank's security cameras, grainy but unmistakable images of Calder using my debit card at 2 a.m., 3 blocks from my apartment. The timestamp proved he'd been using my card while I was asleep, presumably after memorizing my PIN. We're reversing all unauthorized transactions, but the investigation will take time, Marcel said. In the meantime, we've issued you a new card and closed the compromised accounts. At work, Tessa had been equally thorough in documenting the attempted payroll fraud. The IP address trace had led to a location that, when I checked, turned out to be an internet cafe near Mireya's old apartment. The attempted changes would have redirected my entire paycheck to an account registered under a name I didn't recognize, likely a fake identity. The good news is that our security protocols prevented any actual changes, Tessa explained. But this was a sophisticated attempt. Whoever did this had access to your employee ID, social security number, and enough personal information to pass several security questions. The weight of the betrayal was staggering. This wasn't impulsive theft, it was a calculated long-term plan to systematically drain my finances while using my home for their illegal business. Nina, my observant neighbor, had been keeping an informal log of the comings and goings from my apartment. When I approached her with a request for a formal statement, she was more than willing to help. "I've been in education for 25 years, she told me as we sat in the building's small cafe area. You develop an eye for when something isn't right. The people coming to your apartment weren't visiting. They were clearly short-term renters, different people every few days, always with luggage, often asking me for directions or building information." She showed me a small notebook where she'd been jotting down observations, times, descriptions, even license plate numbers of some visitors. Her natural attention to detail had created a timeline that perfectly corroborated the evidence I was gathering. "The most telling thing was last Tuesday," Nina continued. "I saw your son loading suitcases into a car at 5:45 a.m. I noted the time because it seemed odd. When I looked out again an hour later, there was a cleaning crew entering your apartment. Professional cleaners, not just tidying up." The picture was becoming crystal clear. Calder and Mireya were running a full-scale Airbnb operation, complete with guest turnover and professional cleaning between stays. They'd turned my home into a business while systematically stealing my identity and finances. That evening, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. I was going to confront the situation head-on, but not in the way they'd expect. Instead of an emotional confrontation, I was going to dismantle their operation piece by piece, using the same methodical approach that had made me successful in my career. I started by securing my apartment. I changed all the locks, installed a security camera of my own, and created a comprehensive inventory of my belongings. Every document, every valuable item, every piece of personal information was cataloged and secured. Next, I began the formal eviction process. Grant had prepared the necessary paperwork, and I served Calder and Mireya with 30 days' notice to vacate the premises. Their reaction was exactly what I'd expected, a combination of outrage, manipulation, and threats. "Dad, what's gotten into you?" Calder demanded when he found the eviction notice on his pillow. "We're family. We're helping you settle in." "By stealing my money and running an illegal hotel out of my living room?" The mask slipped for just a moment, a flash of surprise that I actually knew what they'd been doing. But Calder recovered quickly, switching to his wounded son routine. "I don't know what you think you saw, but you're wrong. Mireya and I have been nothing but supportive. If you want us to leave, fine, but don't make up stories to justify it." Mireya's approach was more direct. "You can't prove anything, and even if you could, what are you going to do about it? You're just a sad old man who can't handle that his son is more successful than he is." Their responses told me everything I needed to know. They weren't denying the theft or the subletting. They were challenging me to do something about it. They still saw me as weak, as someone who could be manipulated or intimidated into backing down. They had no idea what was coming. With the eviction notice served and my evidence gathering in full swing, I entered the most critical phase of my plan. Everything had to be perfect, documented, verified, and legally sound. I couldn't afford any mistakes that might give Calder and Mireya an opportunity to escape consequences or turn the situation around on me. Grant had been invaluable in helping me understand the legal landscape. During our second meeting, he brought news that strengthened my case considerably. "I've reviewed the building management forms that were filed when your son moved in," Grant said, spreading papers across his desk. "There's a problem with the signature on the guest registration form." He showed me a document that supposedly bore my signature, authorizing Calder as a long-term guest with building privileges. The signature was close, but not quite right. The E in Ethan was formed differently than I actually write it. "This is forgery," Grant explained, "and it's what gave your son access to building amenities and the ability to provide guest keys to his Airbnb customers. Without this form, he would have been limited to visitor access only." The forged signature was another piece of evidence showing premeditation and sophistication. This wasn't opportunistic theft. It was a carefully planned operation that had been in motion long before I'd even signed the lease on the apartment. I spent the next week methodically boxing up every item that belonged to Calder and Mireya. Each box was photographed, labeled, and cataloged. I wasn't just removing their belongings. I was creating an inventory that would demonstrate my good faith effort to preserve their property while exercising my legal right to evict them. The building management office had been surprisingly supportive once I explained the situation. The property manager, Mrs. Solvar, was horrified to learn about the illegal subletting operation. "This puts the entire building at risk," she explained. "Unauthorized guests, no background checks, no insurance coverage. If something had happened, theft, damage, injury, the building could have faced massive liability." Mrs. Solvar provided me with copies of noise complaints that had been filed against my unit, complaints I'd never been notified about because Calder had been intercepting building correspondence. There had been 3 formal complaints about parties, loud music, and excessive foot traffic during daytime hours. "We were actually preparing to send you a lease violation notice," Mrs. Solvar admitted. "Your quick action to address this situation may have saved your tenancy." The most damaging evidence came from Mireya's own social media activity. In her eagerness to promote their illegal business, she'd posted dozens of photos and videos showcasing luxury rental accommodations. Many of these posts included identifying details, the apartment number visible in window shots, building amenities, even the view from my balcony. I spent hours screenshotting these posts, noting timestamps and geolocation data. Mireya had essentially created a comprehensive record of their illegal operation, complete with pricing information and guest reviews. One particularly damning post showed Mireya giving a tour of the apartment, highlighting amenities and bragging about the prime location. The video was time-stamped during work hours on a Tuesday, and in the background, you could clearly see personal belongings that I recognized as stolen from my bedroom. Nina had been diligent in her own documentation efforts. Her witness statement now included specific dates, times, and descriptions of at least 15 different individuals who had stayed in my apartment over a 3-week period. She'd also noted the license plates of several vehicles and had even photographed some of the guests when they'd asked her for directions. The pattern was very clear, Nina explained as we reviewed her notes. Check-in around 3 p.m., check-out around 11 a.m., with professional cleaning crews arriving within an hour of guest departure. It was more organized than most hotels. The financial investigation had revealed the full scope of the theft. Marcel at the bank had traced the stolen funds to 3 different accounts, one under Calder's name, one under Mireya's name, and a third under what appeared to be a business entity called Urban Stays LLC. The business account is particularly concerning, Marcel explained. It shows regular deposits consistent with rental income, along with payments to cleaning services, key-cutting services, and what appears to be liability insurance for short-term rentals. They hadn't just been stealing my money, they'd been using it to fund and legitimize their illegal operation. My own funds had been used to pay for the infrastructure that enabled them to commit fraud against me. Tessa at HR had completed her investigation into the attempted payroll fraud. The evidence showed multiple attempts to access my employee portal with increasingly sophisticated social engineering tactics. The first attempts were simple password guessing, Tessa explained, but the later attempts used personal information that could only have come from someone with intimate knowledge of your background. Your mother's maiden name, your first pet's name, the street you grew up on. The realization that Calder had been mining my personal history for security question answers added another layer to the betrayal. Every family story I'd shared, every childhood memory, had been weaponized against me. As the 30-day eviction notice period approached its end, I prepared for the final phase of my plan. All evidence was organized, all witnesses were prepared to testify, and all legal documents were in order. But Gordon had one more surprise for me. "I've been reviewing all the camera footage," he told me during a quiet meeting in his apartment. "There's something you need to see, something that changes everything." He pulled up a video file I hadn't seen before, dated from my second day in the apartment. "This is the full conversation between your son and his girlfriend." I enhanced the audio. What I heard sent a sudden chill through me. It wasn't just theft. It was a calculated plan to completely destroy my financial stability and take over my identity. "The old man is so clueless," Mireya's voice was clear on the recording. "By the time he figures out what's happening, we'll have everything. The apartment, his credit, his bank accounts, everything." Calder's response was even worse. "He's been supporting me my whole life. It's time he paid me back properly. Besides, what's he going to do about it? He's too weak to fight back." They were wrong about that last part. The final week before the eviction deadline arrived with an eerie calm that reminded me of the stillness before a thunderstorm. I'd spent weeks building my case, gathering evidence, and preparing for what I knew would be a decisive confrontation. Now, with everything in place, I felt a strange sense of peace. My evidence folder had grown thick with documentation. Bank records, security footage, witness statements, social media screenshots, and legal documents. Grant had reviewed everything and declared it overwhelming and irrefutable. Marcel at the bank had completed his fraud investigation, with criminal charges pending against both Calder and Mireya. Tessa at HR had flagged my employment records for additional security and confirmed that the attempted payroll fraud would be reported to law enforcement. I'd taken to meeting with Nina at a small cafe near our building, partly for operational security and partly because I valued her perspective. As someone who'd spent decades observing teenage behavior, she had insights into the psychology of entitlement that helped me understand what I was dealing with. "The thing about kids like your son," Nina said during one of our coffee meetings, "is that they've never faced real consequences. They've learned that charm and manipulation can get them out of trouble, so they keep escalating until someone finally says no. I should have said no a long time ago." "Maybe. But you're saying it now, and you're doing it the right way. You're not just reacting emotionally, you're building a case that will stand up in court and protect you from future manipulation." That afternoon, Marcel called with an update that both relieved and infuriated me. "We've managed to freeze the accounts where your stolen funds were deposited," he said. "The total amount we've recovered is just over $6,000, though there may be additional funds in accounts we haven't identified yet." "What about criminal charges?" "The district attorney's office has reviewed the evidence and will be filing charges for identity theft, bank fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Given the sophistication of the operation and the amount of money involved, these are felony charges." The reality of felony charges gave me pause. Despite everything Calder had done, he was still my son. But then I remembered Mireya's voice on the recording, talking about taking everything, and Calder's casual dismissal of me as too weak to fight back. They'd made their choice. Now they'd face the consequences. Tessa had called an emergency meeting with building security and upper management at my company. The attempted payroll fraud had raised concerns about broader security vulnerabilities, and they wanted to ensure that other employees weren't at risk. "This was a sophisticated social engineering attack," Tessa explained to the group. "The perpetrators had access to detailed personal information that allowed them to bypass multiple security measures. We're implementing additional verification protocols for all payroll changes." The irony wasn't lost on me. Calder and Mireya's attempt to steal from me had resulted in improved security for hundreds of my coworkers. Their greed had made them sloppy, and their sloppiness had exposed them. As the eviction deadline approached, Calder and Mireya's behavior became increasingly erratic. They'd stopped pretending to be helpful or apologetic and had shifted to outright hostility. "You think you're so smart," Mireya had hissed at me the previous evening, "but you're just a pathetic old man who can't handle that his son is more successful than he'll ever be." "You can't stop us," she'd added in a text message later that night. "You're old and weak, and we're just getting started." Their confidence was based on a fundamental misunderstanding of who they were dealing with. They saw me as a victim, someone to be manipulated and discarded. They had no idea that I'd been systematically documenting every crime they'd committed and building a case that would destroy their lives. The final piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. Gordon had been working with a tech specialist to enhance the audio from his hidden camera, and they'd uncovered conversations that revealed the true scope of the operation. "It's not just your apartment," Gordon explained as he played the enhanced recordings. "They've been planning to expand this operation to other properties. Your place was just the test case." The recording was devastating. Mireya and Calder discussing their plans to target other elderly tenants, to use the same combination of identity theft and illegal subletting to build what they called their rental empire. "The beauty of it is that by the time they figure out what's happening, we'll have moved on to the next mark." Mireya's voice was clear on the recording. "These old people are so trusting, so easy to manipulate." Calder's response was even more chilling. "My dad is perfect for this because he's so passive. He'll never fight back, never make waves. We could probably keep this going for years." Listening to my son talk about me like I was a mark to be conned was the final straw. Any lingering guilt about the consequences he was about to face evaporated. This wasn't family dysfunction. This was predatory criminal behavior. The night before the final eviction deadline, I received a call from Mrs. Solvar at building management. "Mr. Hale, we need to schedule an emergency meeting tomorrow morning. The police have requested to be present and will need all your documentation and evidence. It's time to end this." I spent that evening organizing my evidence one final time, ensuring that everything was labeled, dated, and ready for presentation. The folder was now over 2 inches thick, a comprehensive record of systematic fraud, theft, and criminal conspiracy. As I prepared for bed, I noticed that the red light on Gordon's hidden camera had stopped blinking. He'd told me he would deactivate it before the meeting, but seeing it go dark felt symbolic. The surveillance phase was over. Tomorrow would be about justice. My phone buzzed with one final text from Mireya. "You think you've won, but this isn't over. We'll make sure everyone knows what a terrible father you are." I smiled as I deleted the message. Let them try. By tomorrow evening, they'd have much bigger problems to worry about than their public image. The calm before the storm was ending. The reckoning was about to begin. The emergency meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the building's community room, a neutral space that could accommodate all the parties involved. I arrived 15 minutes early with my evidence folder, backup drive, and a quiet confidence that had been building for weeks. Gordon was already there, setting up his laptop and checking the audio equipment. Mrs. Solvar from building management was reviewing paperwork at the head table. Grant, my attorney, arrived precisely on time with his own file of legal documents. Nina had taken a personal day from work to provide her witness testimony. The room felt charged with anticipation, like a courtroom before a major verdict. At exactly 10 a.m., Calder and Mireya arrived with someone they introduced as their legal representative, a young man in an ill-fitting suit who turned out to be just a friend with no legal training. Their confidence was palpable, and they took seats at the opposite end of the table with the casual arrogance of people who believed they were untouchable. "I'm not sure why we need this whole production," Calder said with his characteristic charm. "If Dad wants us to leave, we'll leave. No need for all this drama." Mrs. Solvar called the meeting to order and introduced the 2 police officers who had just arrived, Detective Draven from the fraud unit and Officer Martinez from Building Security Liaison. "We're here to address serious allegations of fraud, identity theft, and illegal commercial activity," Detective Draven began. "Mr. Hale has provided substantial evidence, and we'll be reviewing everything systematically." Grant stood to present our case, methodically laying out the timeline of events and the evidence we'd gathered. He started with the financial fraud, presenting bank records that showed the unauthorized transfers and ATM withdrawals. The defendant accessed Mr. Hale's bank accounts without permission and stole over $6,000, Grant explained, handing copies of the bank records to everyone present. These transactions were captured on security cameras and traced to accounts under the defendant's names. Calder tried to interrupt. "That money was for rent and expenses. Dad said I could—" "Mr. Hale never authorized any automatic transfers or external account access," Grant continued smoothly. "The bank's fraud investigation confirmed that these were unauthorized transactions." Next came the payroll fraud evidence. Tessa had provided a detailed report showing the multiple attempts to access my employee portal and change my direct deposit information. The attempted payroll fraud would have redirected Mr. Hale's entire salary to an account controlled by the defendants, Grant explained. The IP trace led to a location associated with the defendants, and the personal information used could only have come from someone with intimate family knowledge. Mireya's friend tried to object. "You can't prove who was actually using that computer." Detective Draven cut him off. "Actually, we can. The internet cafe has security cameras, and we've identified both defendants using the computers during the times these access attempts were made." The illegal subletting evidence was even more damning. Grant presented Nina's witness statement, the building's noise complaints, and the social media posts that Mireya had foolishly made public. The defendants operated an illegal short-term rental business out of Mr. Hale's apartment without his knowledge or consent, Grant said, showing printed screenshots of Mireya's social media posts. They advertised the property, collected payment from guests, and hired cleaning services, all while violating the building's lease terms and city regulations. Nina stood to provide her testimony, her teacher's voice clear and authoritative as she described the constant stream of strangers, the professional cleaning crews, and the obvious commercial activity. In my 25 years as an educator, I've learned to observe patterns of behavior, Nina said. This was clearly a business operation, not normal residential activity. But the most devastating evidence came when Gordon activated his laptop and began playing the enhanced audio recordings from his hidden camera. The room fell silent as Mireya's voice filled the space. The old man is so clueless. By the time he figures out what's happening, we'll have everything. The apartment, his credit, his bank accounts, everything. Calder's response was equally damning. He's been supporting me my whole life. It's time he paid me back properly. Besides, what's he going to do about it? He's too weak to fight back. The color drained from both their faces as they realized the full scope of the evidence against them. Their casual confidence evaporated, replaced by the dawning understanding that they were facing serious criminal charges. Grant continued with the forged building documents, showing how Calder had faked my signature to gain building privileges that enabled their illegal operation. Document forgery is a felony, Grant noted. Combined with the identity theft and fraud, we're looking at multiple serious criminal charges. Detective Draven took over at this point, formally reading Calder and Mireya their rights and explaining the charges being filed against them. Identity theft in the first degree, bank fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, and violation of city ordinances regarding illegal short-term rentals, he listed methodically. The district attorney's office will be filing formal charges this afternoon. Marcel from the bank had joined the meeting by phone to explain the financial investigation and account freezing. We've recovered approximately $6,000 in stolen funds. His voice came through the speaker clearly. Additional accounts are still being investigated, and the defendant's banking privileges have been suspended pending the criminal investigation. Mrs. Solvar announced that both Calder and Mireya were permanently banned from all properties managed by the company, and that the building was filing its own civil lawsuit for damages and lease violations. Mireya's phone buzzed during the proceedings, a notification that she glanced at and then quickly tried to hide, but Officer Martinez had seen it too. That appeared to be an Airbnb notification, he said. May I see your phone? The notification showed that Mireya's Airbnb host account had been suspended and her funds seized as part of the criminal investigation. Her illegal rental empire was crumbling in real time. Calder made one last desperate attempt at manipulation, turning to me with tears in his eyes. Dad, please, I'm your son. We can work this out as a family. Don't let them destroy my life over a misunderstanding. For a moment, I felt the old familiar pull of parental guilt. But then I remembered the recordings, the casual way he'd dismissed me as too weak to fight back, the systematic way he'd planned to destroy my financial stability. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and spoke the words I should have said months ago. You made your choice when you decided to treat me like a victim instead of your father. These aren't misunderstandings, Calder. These are crimes, and actions have consequences. Detective Draven and Officer Martinez escorted Calder and Mireya from the building in handcuffs as the other residents watched from their windows and doorways. Their friend who'd posed as a lawyer quietly slipped away, wanting no part of the criminal charges that were about to be filed. Mrs. Solvar handed me a formal letter confirming that all lease violations had been resolved and that my tenancy was secure. Grant provided me with copies of all the legal documents and explained the civil lawsuit process that would recover additional damages. Gordon packed up his equipment and handed me the original hard drive containing all the camera footage. I'm glad I could help, he said simply. Sometimes doing the right thing means making hard choices. As the meeting dispersed, Nina approached me with a gentle smile. You did the right thing, Ethan. It took courage to stand up to family, but you protected yourself and probably prevented them from victimizing others. I walked back to my apartment, truly my apartment now, and sat in the quiet space that had been the center of so much chaos. The evidence folder sat on my kitchen table, thick with documentation of betrayal and fraud, but also proof of my own strength and resilience. My phone rang. It was Ronan. "I heard through the grapevine that you finally grew a backbone," he said, with characteristic bluntness. "How do you feel?" I thought about his question for a long moment, considering everything that had happened and everything that was still to come. "Free," I finally answered. For the first time in years, I feel free. The apartment was quiet now, truly quiet, without the undercurrent of deception and manipulation that had poisoned it for weeks. I'd learned that respect must be enforced, not begged for, and that calm observation and documentation could be more powerful than emotional confrontation. Most importantly, I'd learned that family loyalty is not a free license for exploitation, and that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable destructive behavior. Calder and Mireya would face the consequences of their choices in court. I would rebuild my financial security and my peace of mind, and I would never again underestimate my own strength or allow anyone, family or otherwise, to treat me as a victim. The hidden camera was gone, but I no longer needed it. I'd learned to see clearly with my own eyes, and I'd found the courage to act on what I saw. That was a kind of vision